Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And welcome back to my channel and this new series, New Aeon Agora. Since you're watching this, we can say plainly now. No rapture, once again. No trumpet. No vanishing believers. No skyhook. The date setters will shrug, shift the goalpost and print a fresh new chart. And then publish a new book or maybe 10. And then carry on flooding Rapture Talk and Rapture Tube as if nothing has happened. Today, I want to do something different though. Because rather than chasing the latest fail countdown, we should ask where this idea actually comes from and how it was smuggled into popular Christianity in the 19th and 20th centuries. And how Thelema keeps the one useful insight while discarding the escapism. And also why the real threat to our lives is not a legion of hidden demons, but the very public inequality that hollows out communities and the capture of our institutions by the super rich. So let us begin at the beginning, because the modern rapture is not ancient. It is not in the Nicene Creed, and it is not how the early church spoke about hope. The obsession with the secret evacuation before time of tribulation was systematized by one John Nelson Darby, a leading figure among the Plymouth Brethren in the 19th century, who built a prophetic timetable that divided history into sealed eras, and then drew a sharp line between Israel and the church, and finally cut a trapdoor into that timeline so that the church could be whisked away and the final sequence could then proceed, which is to say, this was a novel scaffolding rather than the universal teaching of Christianity across centuries. This is a biographical thread that matters here, because Aleister Crowley was born into a strict Plymouth Brethren household. His father preached that message, and Crowley rebelled and walked his own road. And whether you revere him or detest him, you cannot understand the edge in his later critique of Protestant literalism without seeing that upbringing, and the intensity of his break makes more sense once you recognize the walls he grew up inside. Darby's chart did not spread on elegance alone, and it rose to prominence when Cyrus Scofield printed explanatory notes in his study Bible in 1909, so that, for many readers, those notes felt as authoritative as the sacred text they stood beside. Later, in the 20th century, Hall Lindsey turned that template into the bestseller with The Late Great Planet Earth. And in 1990s and 2000s, the Left Behind novels reworked the same outline as thrillers. And the effect was a generation for whom Before the Tribulation Rapture felt like mere Christianity, when in truth, it was a modern program with a very specific pedigree. Let us name the core claims in plain term, because dispensationalism divides sacred history into distinct dispensations, with their own rules, and then draws a hard line between Hethic Israel and the Christian Church, and then makes its most famous move with a before the tribulation removal of believers that restarts the prophetic clock for Israel and clears the stage for the final drama. This is why you keep hearing that the faithful have to disappear before the fireworks begin, since the system needs that exit for the chart to work. Now I want to hold that chart besides the Thelemic understanding of time and revelation, because in Thelema we do not accept escapism and we do not treat history like a punitive cosmic soap opera. What we keep is the recognition that human spirituality unfolds through great shifts in formulae, which we call the successions of the Aeons. So you have Isis, and then Osiris, and then Horus, which are not legal dispensations, but vast initiatory paradigms that color religion and art, and ethics too, and the experience of the self. And the Aeon of Horus is not a promise of rescue, but a summons to sovereignty and responsibility, to the discovery and enactment of true will, where dispensations are about discontinuity by decree, and eons are about transformations through consciousness. If you know my work, you know that I say this without flinching. The Aeon of Horus does not wave away suffering with a timetable. It demands that we grow up. It teaches that every man and every woman is a star, which means each life has a course to steer and a light to give and duties to accept. And so, no panic, no countdown clock, no fantasy of being spared the work of being human. Why then does the rapture craze keep turning, even as yesterday's certainty becomes today's embarrassment? And because it is perfect for the outrage economy. It packages moral clarity for sale. It offers a ready list of enemies. It gives a community the thrill of being the ones who know. And above it all, is endlessly renewable. Since a failed prediction is not failure in this market, but fresh content. You just reset the board, you retell the story, you sell the sequel, and the feeling itself becomes the product. You've heard me warn about the seepage of Christian fundamentalism into esoteric space. And you can watch the costume change while the script remains exactly the same. One week, the threat is demons. The next, it is trans people, then migrants, then Muslims, then musicians, then it will be books. There will always be an enemy. There will always be a clock, always a pledge drive. And I want you to be very clear that I'm not speaking against faith itself. I am speaking against fear as a business model and against those who use faith as the wrapping paper. The real crisis is not that we must force God into schools by decree or police one another's music or clothes or sexuality. The real crisis is material. When ordinary people could rely on rising wages and dependable service and holidays with their kids and the few luxuries that make life a little sweeter, there was less oxygen for manufactured moral panics. And as inequality widened and a tiny lid pulled more of the pie to their side of the table, that's when the fear narratives bloomed. Because the rapture is a perfect distraction when your rent has doubled and your healthcare is a coin toss, and a way to point your anger at your neighbor while the people who set the prices slip out of the back with the whole deal. This is why I keep saying that the answer is not a louder dose of supernatural drama. The answer is to fight the conditions that keep people anxious and divided, support movement to raise floors and curb abuses, defend institutions meant to serve the many rather than the few, build community that practice mutual aid and a sane spiritual life. And if you crave an apocalypse, remember that the word means unveiling, revelation. So let this revelation, let this unveiling be the exposure of how wealth and power really operate in your city and your country and your industry, because that revelation will change your life faster than any prophecy chart. I want to speak to those raised on these teachings, because if you were taught that to count days and fear headlines, I see you. And it takes courage to admit you were sold certainty as a substitute for hope and courage to reclaim your agency. You do not need a secret evacuation plan to be faithful or ethical or brave. You need a spine and a heart and a community. And you can have all three. And to my fellow cultists and seekers, let us not flatter ourselves that we are immune, since every scene has its hucksters and pain merchants and itinerant prophets who always seems to need your donation today because the world will end next Tuesday. I think Thelema gives us a much better compass, asking us to know our will, to love under will, to take responsibility for our share of the great work, and to read history as the unfolding of consciousness rather than a pre-written disaster movie that we hope to skip. And so let us gather the threads, because the rapture, as commonly preached, is nothing but a modern construct given legs by Darby, reinforced by study Bible notes, and turned into entertainment by publishers. It is not the shared confessions of 2 millennia. Crowley, who was born by the same brethren that incubated this mindset, reacted against its literalism and carried that reaction into his own project. Thelema does not predict an escape. It maps the maturation of the human spirit through eons. And when we look at the manufactured culture wars, we should recognize who benefits when neighbors are set at each other's throat. They're never the poor, they're never the working class, they're never the small shop. It's always the people who can afford to fund the panic while buying yet another island mansion far away from any consequence. No rapture means no rescue from our duties. And every man and every woman is a star is not a slogan, but a mandate to shine with clarity, to find and do your will, to care for the people around you, to refuse the cheap thrill of fear, and to put your energy where it can change a life that actually stands before you. If you want a sign from heaven, begin by becoming one for someone else. If this helped clear the fog, please like and subscribe and share. And if you wish to support the work, you can enroll in my courses or join on Patreon or become a channel member. The links are all below as usual. Before you go, tell me in the comments the wildest failed prediction you were ever sold and what you're doing now to invest in the world that is truly here. And if you want to go a little bit deeper into what the successions of the Aeons mean or how Thelema reads our moment, there is plenty here on the channel or across my other work. Do what the willed shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love and the will.